Hi everybody, I'm Jack. This is Raw Tropical Living. Thanks for joining me today. Well, it's Thursday afternoon, about 3:30, and all I have left after doing this video is to finish up some preparations for dinner tonight, which incidentally I'm going to shoot a video for as well. I've been in a pretty creative mode since I got back from Woodstock. Now I'm just kind of trying to get everything back organized and get into my workflow, and it's coming along. So anyhow, I want to talk today about how my raw vegan philosophy is simple. Just some random thoughts I have on the subject. I do videos every day, so if you're not already subscribed to my channel, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that subscribe button now. Click on that little bell and check send notifications so you will stay subscribed to the channel. This video kind of came about as I was looking through some old books and some old resources of mine. I had somebody reach out to me just recently, kind of just totally had no idea about this lifestyle, was just interested looking to it kind of as a last resort, it almost sounded like. So I really wanted to hit them with some good information and just kind of give them a good thought process and kind of a big picture plan to move ahead. Because, and before I get started here, I want to say, like, sometimes, and this is going to be more big picture stuff and not detail. Like I say, this is kind of philosophy and not getting down to the exact nuts and bolts. But, when it comes to something like this, there's so much information to take in. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot for your body to learn and adapt to, that a lot of times we need to grasp that big picture before we start trying to get into these details and doing this and like knowing the specific micros and macros of this and that. That's just my philosophy, and I've tried to keep this thing as simple as possible. So one of the books I was looking through, I was, obviously I'm thinking, well, here's my thought process and why I started looking through some of the books I'm looking at. I'm trying to think of it from different ways. I'm trying to think of it like, how to motivate a person for this lifestyle, but also too, just how to, even if they've already said, yeah, I want to try this, like to really convince them, I think to be successful on this lifestyle, and I think why so many people struggle is they don't really understand their why. They don't understand why they're doing this. And that can just come from some of the simple basic education of starting to learn. Actually, I learned very quick on because all I had to do was read a few things. Like for me, it was the China study. Now, I didn't learn a lot of direct stuff from the China study. I didn't learn a lot of specifics that I've taken and incorporated, but I got the big picture. I started to understand disease. What is the cause of disease? How to treat disease. Maybe there's just one disease that manifests itself in a bunch of different ways. So that was just something that caught my attention. And I've always tried to convey to people that, yeah, the China study isn't the end-all, be-all book on a plant-based lifestyle or this, but it was that first thing that just I had that aha moment. Like I say, that book slapped me in the face. And once I read some of the realities in there was no going back. I had to figure out how to do this thing because after I knew, I couldn't unknow. So I didn't want to, I was going to say, as a kind of a place to start, if you need to know your why, if you need to really be convinced about this, start with T. Colin Campbell, start with the China study. But then I got my book Whole out, and I started going through it again, and then as I was looking through, when I was reading it before, I highlighted a number of stuff and I started looking through there and I said, huh. And I started thinking at first like I might make a video, several videos out of just specific points in here. And I said, no, let's keep this a big picture sort of thing and just read the highlights and kind of read and most of these highlights, as I looked at them, summarize, what make up my thoughts or my philosophy or what I believe about a whole food plant-based lifestyle. So let me just read a few things that I have marked here. We'll start off with, I like this, the opening quote on the very first chapter, which is titled "The Modern Healthcare Myth." He who cures a disease may be the skillfulest, but he that prevents it is the safest physician. That's why this lifestyle resonated with me from day one. Although, I don't obviously don't incorporate all the elements of traditional Chinese medicine. I've always liked that kind of mentality from the East, that aspect of Eastern Chinese or traditional Chinese medicine. And just the thought in the East that it's always been about prevention. I never quite understood that. Why, even though I didn't know anything about this lifestyle, and even though I was in a place where I didn't really care all that much about health, obviously, the way I was drinking and the way I was eating, somehow I always knew that it was about prevention and that nobody ever talked about prevention. It was always after the fact. So when I started reading some of this, some of the groundwork I think was already laid, and it made a lot of sense to me. So let me just go through what we have. We talk about the healthcare system, and a lot of this is systematic stuff. It's it's kind of like the odds that are stacked against us because, if you look at the way food is created, farmed these days, big food and the way it's mass produced, and then you look at the big pharmaceutical companies, you're up against trillions of dollars that don't want you to see a lot of the information out there that could save your life, because then you don't eat all their junky food. They don't have as much control over the food system, and you kind of get set up for life where you're going to take pills, and that's what keeps that whole thing funding. So we talk about the healthcare system in America, but that's a misnomer. What we really have is a disease care system. It's all about fixing something afterwards. And actually, it's not usually fixed. It's just usually to kind of maintain, to kind of keep the machine running. The United States spends more money per capita on healthcare than any country on earth. Yet when the quality of our healthcare is compared with other industrialized nations, we rank near the bottom. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention report that the age-adjusted type 2 diabetes rate in the United States has more than doubled from 1980 to 2010, from 2.5% to 6.9% of the population. So these are things like, they're treating symptoms. They're not treating the disease. Why are we seeing more and more and more people have type 2 diabetes? And it's that 1-2 punch of the food system and the medical system that we don't get this real information to us. And like I say, that's why I had this random thoughts. Like, a lot of this stuff's just going to jump from one thing to the next, but it's all very basic stuff that resonates. Side effects of those very same prescription drugs are the third leading cause of death behind heart disease and cancer. That's right. Prescription drugs kill more people than traffic accidents. Let me say that again. Prescription drugs kill more people than traffic accidents. What's the first thing they do? You go to somewhere, and I'm not saying this isn't one of those for or against medicine. I'm sure pharmaceuticals have their place, but I have a friend. He went to the doctor a few years ago. He's a fairly robust. He doesn't eat like us, but he's 40 and he's fairly trim. He's fit. He's active, and his blood pressure was a little high. First thing the doctor wanted to do was just put him on blood pressure medication. And my friend even asked, "Well, shouldn't we maybe look at what I'm eating?" They're like, "No, that's just not really that important. We need to get you on this medication." The good news. What you eat every day is a far more powerful determinant of your health than your DNA or most of the nasty chemicals lurking in your environment. That DNA, man, people make too much out of the genes. Just because you have a gene doesn't mean you have to express that gene. The foods you consume can heal you faster and more profoundly than the most expensive prescription drugs, and more dramatically than the most extreme surgical interventions with only positive side effects. Now we get into the ideal human diet. This is about as basic as it gets. The ideal human diet looks like this. Consume plant-based foods in forms as close to their natural state as possible. Whole foods. Eat a variety. And not all of this stuff is raw. This is the basic nuts and bolts philosophy of it. So there's going to be things talked about in here that the raw vegans don't eat, but we're trying to get people that further and further down the line. Let's get them to plant-based first. Eat a variety of vegetables, fruits, raw nuts and seeds, beans and legumes, and whole grains. Avoid heavily processed foods and animal products. Stay away from added salt, oil, and sugar. Aim to get 80% of your calories from carbohydrates, 10% from fat, and 10% from protein. This is really true here. If the whole food plant-based diet were a pill, its inventor would be the wealthiest person on earth. Since it isn't a pill, no market forces conspire to advocate for it. No mass media campaign promotes it. No insurance coverage pays for it. Since it isn't a pill and nobody's figured out how to get hugely wealthy by showing people how to eat it, the truth has been buried by half-truths, unverified claims, and downright lies. The concerted effort of many powerful interests to ignore, discredit, and hide the truth has worked so far. Why the whole food plant-based diet makes sense. Oxidation is the process by which atoms and molecules lose electrons as they come into contact with other atoms and molecules. It's one of the most basic chemical reactions in the universe. Oxidation produces something called free radicals, which we know are responsible for encouraging aging, promoting cancer, and rupturing plaques that lead to strokes and heart attacks, among other adverse effects impacting a host of autoimmune and neurologic diseases. When we and other mammals consume plants, we also consume the antioxidants in those plants, and they serve us just as faithfully and effectively as they serve the plants, protecting us from those same free radicals and slowing down that aging process in our cells. This talks about how long does it take for a nutrient, drug, genetic modification, or whatever to actually function within the body. And he's saying, I'm not talking about how long it takes for a substance to be absorbed in the bloodstream and transported to tissue cells. Instead, I'm asking how long before there's a meaningful effect, like an energy boost or reduction of disease symptoms. All right, listen to this. Within 1 to 4 hours of consuming, for example, a high-fat McDonald's meal, Egg McMuffin, Sausage McMuffin, 2 hash brown patties, non-caffeinated beverage, serum triglycerides shoot up, increasing the risk of heart disease and diabetes, as well as many other conditions, and arteries stiffen, raising blood pressure. Recovery to normal fluidity takes several hours. None of this occurs following a low-fat meal consisting of cereal and fruit. The whole food plant-based diet deals with so many diseases and conditions that you begin to wonder if there isn't just one basic disease cause. One root cause, poor nutrition that manifests through thousands of different symptoms. Rather than focus on the underlying cause, Western medicine has decided to focus on the individual symptoms and to call each one of them a disease. And admittedly, it's good business to identify thousands of different diseases, then make and sell treatments for each of them, rather than to look at the big picture and prescribe one simple intervention that helps them all. But it's not good medicine. This is really good stuff in here. You know, I've got books from the Woodstock Fruit Festival that I need to read, so I won't jump back in and read this one just yet. But I want to reread Whole. Protein, here's a good one too. Here's probably the study that kind of got me into this. Protein, the not so perfect nutrient. Talking about T. Colin Campbell when he was in the late 70s working in the Philippines, and they found the children in the Philippines who ate the most protein were the ones most likely to get liver cancer. That finding was so strange and so counter to everything I believed and thought I knew that I immediately searched the scientific literature to see if anyone else had ever seen a connection between protein and cancer. Someone had. A group of Indian researchers who conducted a gold standard clinical trial, the kind that isolates one variable and performs a controlled experiment on it. The researchers had fed aflatoxin, a powerful carcinogen, to 2 groups of rats. One group was fed a 20% animal protein casein diet. The other group was protein deprived, ingesting only 5% of their calories from casein. The results? Every single 20% protein rat developed liver cancer or cancer precursor lesions. Not a single 5% protein rat did. And I still remember those studies from the China study where he was basically turning tumors on and off, with how much protein was being taken in. Like I say, the specifics of this, some people try to poke holes in the China study, but the common sense of it it jumps out and grabs me. not part of our, they're just another random one, not part of our current paradigm is that the food we eat is a much more powerful determinant of cancer than just about any environmental toxin. Very interesting. I've even heard of like, not saying go out and start smoking, but in Okinawa, which there's an area in Okinawa that was one of the blue zones, that even the Japanese, you know, before it kind of got Americanized and there was fast food, the Japanese had lower rates of cancer because of the way they were eating over there, in Okinawa specifically, and that even though, yeah, you shouldn't start smoking, but people that smoked, that ate like this, that lived a certain lifestyle, didn't tend to manifest those cancers. The attacks on and dismissals of my findings, this is T. Colin Campbell talking, are more than the normal scientific discovery process, however. The real issue in many cases is that I'm asking questions that threaten the reigning research and medical paradigms. Have you ever noticed that with the medical profession? People get angry when you question certain things. Why are they getting angry? Well, because you're poking at a $100 billion, probably $1 trillion giant, and you know you're poking at his money supply, and he don't like that. We've discovered that cow's milk protein at reasonable levels of intake markedly promotes experimental cancer growth, which is outside of the nutrition paradigm. We found that cancer growth is controlled far more by nutrition than by genes, which is outside of the scientific paradigm. It makes it, that's just what I said, you know, it's like we might have a genetic predisposition to have something like cancer, heart disease, but we don't have to express that. And a lot of the genetic stuff, I think, fails to take into account that yes, we have the same genes as our parents and other relatives, but we also tend to develop their lifestyles, and we tend to do the same things. We tend to eat the same things that they did. So it kind of, if you think about it, that goes back to the food being the most important. I think that was about it right there. Let me see if there's any other little tidbits of wisdom. Oh, reductionism. This kind of gets into the whole part of the whole versus reductionism. That's something definitely to look into. Reductionism versus holism. If you're a reductionist, you believe that everything in the world can be understood if you understand all its component parts. A holist, on the other hand, believes that the whole can be greater than the sum of its parts. I've always, in everything in life, believed that the whole can be greater than the sum of its parts. Holism does not oppose reductionism. Rather, holism encompasses reductionism, just as each whole encompasses its parts. Western medicine views the body geographically. It treats the liver, the kidney, the heart, the left patella, and so on. Chinese medicine, by contrast, sees the body as a whole energetic network. It might diagnose a patient with the Western label of liver cancer suffering from too much yang in the triple burner meridian. Okay, you get into some out there stuff with whole traditional Chinese medicine. But I submit that this viewpoint is naive, at least for biological systems like a whole body. As an example, let's take the enzyme, a protein that is instrumental to the various chemical reactions necessary for the proper function of the human body, like the digestion of food and the construction of cells. Through experimentation and observation, we can discern the chemical composition, size, shape, and some of the functionality of the enzyme. Is a summation of these things the enzyme? According to modern medicine, the answer is yes. Modern science sees the enzyme as a discrete entity with discernible edges, and its goal is to discern those edges. But I could I could keep going. I think that might be as far as I got, and I need to continue reading. But no, I just thought, like these are all these things, and that's why I've always liked to recommend D. Colin Campbell. Not necessary for the particulars, but just to kind of understand the big picture of it, that why, because it was so powerful to me. And as I'm getting started, and I said, okay, now how do I inspire this person? Number one, to do it. Number two, to want to, stick to what they're doing. And that was it. You've got to know your why. You have to understand why you're doing this lifestyle. Just following a bunch of other people doing it because you want some, and even just saying, well, I want to lose some weight or whatever. You've really got to dig in there and know why you're doing this lifestyle. So those random thoughts pretty much sum up my philosophy on this whole plant-based lifestyle. I just tend to do it a lot more raw than some people do, but like I say, let's just try to get everybody to a clean, whole food, plant-based way of eating. Anyhow, hope you were able to take something out of this one today. If you like it, please give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Love you guys. Peace.